Hello, my name is Matthew, and I just read The Adventure of the Three Garridebs by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is a part of my read along series and book club with Steve Donahue. We're reading murder mysteries in the month of March, and we're reading all the Sherlock Holmes short stories. And The Adventure of the Three Garridebs, it immediately just made me notice how many of these Doyle short stories come in threes. The Adventure of the Three Orange Pips, and just recently The Adventure of the Three Gables, and now we have The Adventure of the Three Garridebs. And I liked this story. I was actually thinking this is the 50th short story now, and from all that I know, I believe that I'm reading them in order of publication. And to be 50 in, and even accounting for hits and misses, peaks and valleys, it's still very impressive this late in this character's run to still have just genuinely good, gripping, intriguing, fun short stories in cases. Now, this short story also does have like the title coming in threes. This short story also has a recurring plot device or a recurring premise. So it's this idea of having just the most fantastical supervillain plan, like an elaborate hoax in order to just get someone out of the house. We've seen it in the Adventure of the Red-Headed League, and there's at least one other, but maybe a few times where we have someone. So the one short story, the case where they wanted to buy the whole house, lock, stock, and barrel, in order to just retrieve a manuscript. And this is like that, and so the three Garridebs, we have a telegram that comes in, and it's someone explaining that Garrideb is a very rare, unusual last name. And in America, there was like a real estate giant, someone that just was hugely, incredibly wealthy and eccentric, and his last name was Garrideb. And he found another person that had the last name Garrideb. And in his will, he said, if this other person can find two other people, it has to be three men with the last name Garrideb, they'll get the entire fortune. And so we have this American that now knows if he can find another Garrideb, he checks all of America, the whole of the United States. There's not one other Garrideb. Comes to England and he finds somebody, and this person wrote to Sherlock Holmes saying, someone came to my house, they're talking about my last name Garrideb, and I thought maybe you could help us find the third one. Now the American that came to England bursts in the door of Baker Street with Sherlock and Watson, and it's not the person that wrote the telegram. There was a great moment, actually, as a digression, because Sherlock mentions using the telephone. And we're now into the 20th century, and some inventions have become everyday life amenities. And I was thinking about one of the middle volumes of Proust, somewhere in Search of Lost Time, where we have these French wealthy aristocratic people talking about telephones and how snobbish they were and kind of off-put, and how they might go somewhere to use the phone, but they would never have a telephone in their own house. How inconvenient! Someone could just any old stranger could just call you, and very quickly, without any comment, we just get just a remark. We might have to use the telephone, which is great. Sherlock's a little bit older now. He's moving into a new era, and he's adapting and realizing the convenience and advancement that a telephone could have on his cases and studies, and it's not mentioned, but just the fact that it's there. There's a telephone in the Baker Street apartment. I just love that. These little details make it really fun to reread. But anyway, the American who's come to England found the other Garrideb, finds out the other Garrideb reached out to Sherlock, and so the American comes to see Sherlock. At first, he was very angry that the other person reached out to Sherlock. Realizes, well, Sherlock might be able to help with the case. He is just this master class in solving puzzles, and he explains all of this. That there was a wealthy real estate agent that had all of this money, had an eccentric will, and so now if he can find three male Garridebs, they get all this money. And something that I don't think I've seen in any of these short stories, so many of the person that bursts in the door, no matter how wild or fantastical the story is, Sherlock is interested in getting to the truth, and really takes, for the most part, takes what they say to be honest and genuine. The implication is Sherlock can read all the things that no one else can read, and just knows that the person is telling the truth. So they go back and forth, and Sherlock is asking this person questions, and finally he leaves. The American Garrideb leaves. And Watson says, well, what do you make of this crazy story? And Sherlock says, it's all lies. Everything about this person is a lie. And he goes on with that Holmesian, those Holmesian examples of deduction, and talks about the cut of his suit, and how he had inconsistencies in his story, and he had asked about someone that he knew that lived in America. The American Garrideb said, oh yes, I know that person. It turns out Sherlock just made it up to confirm that he was lying. I love that. I thought that was really neat. So now Sherlock and Watson want to go visit the Garrideb that lives in England, lives in London, or wherever he lives. And they go over there, and it's just this kind of nebbish, I believe he's described as cavernous, just a kind of older, very slight homebody. Never leaves the house. Never, ever, ever leaves the house. And he's a collector. He has jars full of all sorts of unusual specimens. He's a scientist. And when he heard about if they can find, he hears this unbelievable claim that if they can find a third Garrideb, if it's divided off and real estate portions are sold, he would be given or willed the equivalent of like £5 million. And so he's explaining this to Sherlock, saying, I could make quite the collection. I could have a library of all of these specimens, and it would be great for the universities and great for further scientific advancement, all of these things. And the other Garrideb, the American Garrideb, bursts into this guy's house again and says, we found it. We found the other Garrideb. So I'll get back to you, but everything's great now. You have to travel 100 miles. The homebody that never wants to leave his house, he has to travel 100 miles to make contact and explain all this to the other Garrideb. And the homebody scientist, specimen collector, is very much aggravated about this because he doesn't like leaving the house. The American explains, well, I went from America all the way to England to find you, and I have other pressing concerns. It's a day's trip. You should do that. It's worth it. Sherlock agrees. Goes, yeah, we'll all reconvene. You go travel 100 miles away, and we'll sort all of this out. And of course, Sherlock's asking different questions, and one of the questions that comes out of the blue when he's alone with the homebody, Garrideb, is his landlord. I believe they use the term house agent, and he's surprised by that. And Holmes is asking, "How long have you been in the house?" And so Sherlock and Watson are finally discussing this, and clearly, this is a con artist that wants to get this person out of the house, and he came up with this elaborate plan, just like the Red-Headed League, and now I can't remember the name of the story, but there's another one where they try to buy out the house, but they don't know why. Watson thinks, well, maybe there's one of these specimens in the house. There's a reason for that. I believe it's just that the person knows what he has. Sherlock and Watson, they see the homebody scientist Garrideb leave the house, leave the apartment. They go sneaking in, or they got a key. He said he could go there. They could go there, but so they're now in the apartment. They're waiting for the American Garrideb to break into the house, which he does. He goes over to this carpet, pulls it up, opens up a hidden door, which goes into a hidden cellar. Sherlock and Watson spring into an attack. There's gunfire. There's a gun exchange. Watson gets hit. Sherlock jumps on the American Garrideb, gets him down, restrains him, runs over to Watson and goes, "Are you seriously injured? You're not really hurt. You're not really hurt." And it was just a surface wound. So even though he was shot, it was a surface wound, and that means no problem, no problem there. But he's not seriously injured. And it's a really tender moment. Watson takes takes time to kind of revel in this and says, Sherlock with this big brain, it turns out this big brain also has a big heart. And when Watson's life was in danger, that big heart came out, and he realized that Sherlock really does love him and cares about him and protects him. It's a very nice moment. Sherlock runs over and says to the American Garrideb, if he would have been injured, if he would have been killed by that gunshot, you would not leave this apartment alive. Then we get all of the story, and it's a surprise big reveal, although as a reader we know there's something in the house. We haven't been given any clues as to what it could be, and sometimes it's great the like development that comes up that totally blindsides you, this big revelation that you had no idea about. Sometimes it can be disappointing or silly. This time it's good. It turns out that he was a career criminal. He is being a con artist. He made this whole thing up. He's been a murderer. He's killed people. He shot someone and went to prison. And the person that he had shot was like the biggest counterfeiter in England, and he had this huge counterfeiting operation with a giant mechanism that made all of these bills. And the American Garrideb had shot him. He died. He went to prison. He finally gets out, and now there's this eccentric homebody that has a very unusual name that won't come out of the house. And he didn't just want to go in and shoot him. He just wanted to get him out of the house so he could get this counterfeiting operation, and then just start printing out money. It's the idea. And there was something that I was thinking about. We get this whole revelation, and it was so similar to at least a few stories that I had read. And the case of the Red-Headed League was, I believe, the second short story, the second case, and the Adventure of the Three Garridebs is the 50th. And these stories, as Watson is telling them, there's a few consistencies through all of these stories. The person bursting into the room, the fabulous case, Sherlock's theatrical conclusion to the case. Also, the fact that Watson is writing these. So many of these short stories start with Watson selecting the case. And also, Sherlock is always dismissive and looks down on Watson's writings. Now, with all of that, we also know Doyle doesn't want to keep writing these cases and short stories. I apologize, the train's coming by, if you can hear it. And we've had recurrences of Doyle trying to come to a conclusion. It's always been Sherlock dies, Sherlock retires, Sherlock had his last big case that couldn't ever be topped. And I was reading this and I was thinking, how interesting would it be if this American con artist who came up with this idea of having a ridiculous name because this person has a rare name, and just this whole convoluted scenario to get the guy to the house. What if he came up with the idea from reading the case of the Red-Headed League? Because they're all in print. We know Sherlock's fame and reputation has somewhat come from the writings of Watson in this fictional world. And I thought that was interesting. I also thought, just as an idea, what if the conclusion, because we now have like six stories left to read, what if the conclusion is Watson decides, like hearing something like that and thinking, I gave this person inspiration on how to commit a crime, and look at this, I've gotten shot, and this person was in danger. If Watson was the character that started deciding, I don't like writing these anymore. It was just a thought, because it's a recurring. We've had recurring cases, and the idea that perhaps one of the cases recurs because of the case written by Watson, and the fact that the story is a rehash. It's a recycled premise. I do really want to punctuate that it doesn't diminish the quality of the story or even its originality. I was thinking, there's my favorite TV show, one of my favorites is the Andy Griffith Show, which constantly recycles whole storylines. You'll have an episode that's an exact duplicate of older episodes. There's the episodes where Barney joins the choir. There's multiple episodes where the whole premise is that Barney wants to join the choir. Barney has a terrible voice. He's tone deaf. No one wants him to join the choir, but no one has the heart to let him know. They're all great. And it's all about the execution, the little ideas, the little details that go into it, little changes that can still keep a recycled premise great if it's done right. So that was The Adventure of the Three Garridebs. Let me know if you've read it. Thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and take care.